If you've ever looked at a 2000 Lincoln penny and thought, this one's probably just pocket change, you're not alone. But here's the curiosity hook. A small number of verified 2000 no-mint mark pennies have sold for prices that surprised even experienced collectors. Not because they're common and not because they're old, but because of quiet details most people never notice. And by the end of this video, you'll know exactly what to look for and why some owners discover unexpected income from coins they nearly spent. This is where many people get confused, because when they hear valuable penny, they usually think of something from the 1800s or early 1900s. But the year 2000 sits at a very interesting moment in U.S. coin history. It marked the beginning of a new millennium, and the U.S. Mint was producing billions of pennies every year to meet everyday demand. These coins were not intended to be rare. They were meant to circulate, to be used, and eventually to wear out. Yet somehow, within this massive production, certain examples of the 2000 no-mint mark Lincoln penny, the Philadelphia issue, stand out today for reasons most people never notice at first glance. Here's a detail collectors quietly watch: the absence of a mint mark. A 2000 penny without a letter under the date means it was struck at the Philadelphia Mint. And Philadelphia produced more pennies that year than almost any other mint facility. So at first glance, this coin feels extremely common. But this difference can completely change interest, because rarity in coins doesn't always come from low production. Sometimes it comes from condition. Sometimes it comes from errors. And sometimes it comes from combinations of both: coins that survived untouched, while billions of others were worn down in circulation. This is where many people get confused, because most 2000 pennies you find in jars, drawers, or old coffee cans are only worth face value. That's the truth. But a very small number, especially those preserved in unusually high condition or struck with subtle mint errors, have quietly crossed into collector territory. And some have achieved prices that surprise people who have owned them for years without realizing it. Let's talk briefly about what this coin actually is. The 2000 Lincoln cent features Abraham Lincoln on the front, designed by Victor David Brenner, with the Lincoln Memorial on the back. The design that ran from 1959 through 2008. These coins are made mostly of zinc, with a thin copper coating, which makes them lighter and more vulnerable to wear than older copper cents. That's one reason pristine examples from modern years are actually harder to find than many people expect. Here's a detail collectors quietly watch: surface quality. Most modern pennies show scratches, dull luster, or weak strikes even when they look nice to casual eyes. But professional collectors and grading services look for blazing mint luster, sharp details, clean fields, and absolutely minimal contact marks. When a coin from a common year survives in that condition, its market interest changes dramatically. This difference can completely change interest, because a circulated 2000 penny might be worth 1 cent, while a professionally certified example in top condition can sell for many times that, sometimes hundreds of dollars, depending on the grade and demand at the time of sale. And then there are errors. This is where many people get confused, because not every odd-looking coin is valuable. But certain documented mint errors from the year 2000 no-mint mark pennies are actively collected. These can include off-center strikes, broad strikes, clipped planchets, misaligned dies, and doubled design elements, especially doubling visible on Lincoln's face, date, or lettering. Here's a detail collectors quietly watch: true doubling versus machine doubling. Real doubled dies show rounded, separated design elements that look almost like a shadow image, while machine doubling looks flat and shelf-like. One can command collector premiums. The other usually doesn't. This difference can completely change interest, because genuine doubled die examples from modern coins can sell for anywhere from tens of dollars to thousands, depending on strength, visibility, and condition. Now let's talk realistic values, because credibility matters. In circulated condition, A typical 2000 no mint mark penny is worth face value. Even uncirculated examples pulled from rolls or bags usually sell for a few cents to maybe $1 or $2 unless they're exceptional. But certified high-grade coins tell a very different story. Coins graded MS66, MS67, or higher by major grading services have sold for surprisingly strong prices over the years. Some examples have crossed into the hundreds of dollars at auction, especially when population reports show very few coins graded that high. This is where many people get confused, because they assume newer coins can't be valuable. But collectors compete for the very best-known examples of each date and mint. And when supply at the top is extremely limited, demand can drive prices far beyond expectations. This difference can completely change interest, because while millions of 2000 pennies exist, only a tiny number exist in truly flawless or near-flawless condition. And that's what elite collectors compete for. Now let's talk about something even more intriguing: error coins. Some 2000 no mint mark pennies with dramatic errors, such as major off-center strikes, strong die cracks, or multiple strike errors, have sold for prices that qualify as life-changing sale results for select examples. Not because every owner will find one, but because when rare errors combine with strong eye appeal, competition among collectors becomes intense. Here's a detail collectors quietly watch: eye appeal. Two error coins with the same technical mistake can sell for completely different prices depending on how visually striking the error is and how clean the coin remains. This difference can completely change interest, because one coin might sell for $40 while another sells for $4,000, even if both came from the same year and mint, simply because one tells a stronger visual story. And this leads to something most people don't expect: quiet wealth discovery. Some collectors didn't buy these coins. They found them in jars, inherited collections, forgotten drawers, or old rolls tucked away decades ago. They weren't searching for treasure. They were organizing loose change. But when they took the time to look closely, research properly, and sometimes send coins for professional grading, they discovered unexpected income hiding in plain sight. This is where many people get confused, because speed works against value. Rushing to clean coins, polish surfaces, or sell without research often destroys value permanently. Cleaning a coin, even gently, can reduce its worth by 50% or more, sometimes turning a potentially valuable piece into a face value coin overnight. Here's a detail collectors quietly watch: originality. Natural surfaces, untouched patina, and authentic mint luster matter far more than shine. A dull but original coin can be far more valuable than a bright, cleaned one. This difference can completely change interest, because collectors don't buy shine, they buy authenticity. Now let's walk through what separates common 2000 no mint mark pennies from high-value ones. First, condition. Coins that never circulated and show full luster, sharp strikes, and minimal contact marks are the foundation of value. Second, errors and varieties. Off-center strikes, broad strikes, doubled dies, clipped planchets, and misaligned designs all create collector interest, but only when verified and authentic. Third, certification. Coins graded and authenticated by major services often sell for more because buyers trust what they're getting, especially in higher price ranges. Fourth, timing and patience. Market interest shifts over time. Coins that sold for modest amounts years ago sometimes rise significantly as populations tighten and collector demand increases. This is where many people get confused, because they expect immediate results. But some of the strongest sales happen when owners wait, learn, and choose the right time to sell. Here's a detail collectors quietly watch: population reports. These show how many coins exist at each grade level. When only a few coins exist at the top of the scale, competition increases, sometimes sharply. This difference can completely change interest, because a coin that feels ordinary suddenly becomes exceptional when you realize only a handful like it are known. Now let's talk mistakes, because this is where value is often lost. Mistake 1. Cleaning coins. This permanently damages surfaces and drastically reduces collector demand. Mistake 2. Storing coins loosely in jars or plastic bags. Friction causes scratches and wear, even on coins that never circulated. Mistake 3. Assuming modern coins can't be valuable. This mindset causes people to overlook high-grade examples and rare errors. Mistake 4. Selling without research. Many people accept the first offer they hear without checking auction results, price guides, or collector demand. This is where many people get confused because coin values aren't fixed. They depend on condition, demand, certification, and timing, not just the date alone. Here's a detail collectors quietly watch: verified auction sales. These reveal what buyers actually paid, not what sellers hope to get. This difference can completely change interest, because a coin that feels ordinary suddenly looks very different when you see documented sale results from respected auction houses. And that brings us to something powerful: hidden financial potential. Most people won't find a life-changing coin in their pocket. That's reality. But some people quietly, patiently discover meaningful value in coins they already own. Not through hype, not through shortcuts, but through education, careful inspection, and smart decisions. That's how quiet wealth discovery works: not loud promises, but informed action. This is where many people get confused, because they assume treasure hunting requires luck. In reality, it often requires knowledge. Here's a detail collectors quietly watch: consistency. People who regularly examine coins, learn grading standards, and stay informed about error varieties find far more than people who check once and give up. This difference can completely change interest, because the real advantage belongs to those who know what they're looking at, not those who rush. So what should you do if you own 2,000 no mint mark Lincoln pennies? First, don't clean them. Second, check for unusual features: off-center strikes, doubling, clipped edges, strange surfaces, or misaligned designs. Third, examine condition carefully, especially luster, sharpness, and marks. Fourth, consider professional grading for coins that appear unusually pristine or error-related. And fifth, be patient. Some discoveries take time, but that time can turn into unexpected income. This is where many people get confused, because they expect instant answers. But the strongest collectors develop skills over years, not minutes. Here's a detail collectors quietly watch: lighting. Good lighting reveals doubling, surface damage, and strike quality far better than casual inspection. This difference can completely change interest, because what you see or miss often depends on how you look. As we close, here's the most important truth about the 2000 no mint mark Lincoln penny. Most are common, some are interesting, a few are genuinely rare in condition or error form, and select examples have produced life-changing sale results, not because everyone gets rich, but because scarcity, demand, and condition aligned perfectly. That's not hype. That's how collector markets work. So take a moment after this video to look through your own pennies carefully. You might not find anything extraordinary, but you might discover something unexpectedly valuable hiding in plain sight. And if you want to keep learning, watch our next video on another modern penny date that shocked collectors with surprising auction results. Because knowledge and patience matter more than speed, and the best discoveries often come quietly. If you've ever glanced at a 1992 penny and thought, "This one's probably nothing special," stay with me, because some verified examples from this year and mint have sold for prices that shocked even experienced collectors. Not because every coin is rare, but because a very specific group of 1992 pennies quietly changed how collectors look at this date. And one small detail can completely change what your coin is worth. This is where many people get confused, and where real hidden financial potential begins. Today we're talking about the 1992 D Mint mark Abraham Lincoln penny, a coin millions of Americans carried in their pockets, dropped into jars, or saved without a second thought. Yet decades later, certain examples from this exact year have become some of the most closely watched Lincoln cents in the hobby. And for patient owners, this coin has led to what collectors call quiet wealth discovery, the kind that doesn't happen overnight but sometimes changes lives. Let's start with the basics. In 1992, the U.S. Mint was producing massive quantities of Lincoln cents. The country was moving into a new decade, the economy was shifting, and cash still dominated daily life. Pennies were everywhere. The Denver Mint alone struck over 4.6 billion Lincoln cents that year. So, on the surface, the 1992 D penny seems completely ordinary. And that's exactly why it's so interesting. Because when a coin is produced in huge numbers, most people assume none of them matter. But history has shown that some of the most valuable modern pennies come from years when nobody was paying attention. This difference can completely change interest, especially when collectors later discover unusual varieties hiding in plain sight. The standard 1992 D penny is made of zinc with a thin copper coating, weighs 2.5 grams, and features Lincoln on the front and the Lincoln Memorial on the back. If you're holding one right now, it probably looks just like every other penny from the late 1980s and early 1990s. But here's the detail collectors quietly watch. Some 1992 pennies, especially from Philadelphia, were struck with a reverse design intended for 1993, showing wider spacing between the letters in America. These are known as close AM and wide AM varieties. And while the most famous version comes from Philadelphia, the excitement around 1992 has caused collectors to carefully inspect Denver coins as well, searching for unusual reverse traits, striking errors, and high-grade survivors. This is where many people get confused. Not every 1992 penny is rare. In fact, most are worth just 1 cent. But select examples, either because of rare varieties, mint errors, or extraordinary condition, have achieved life-changing sale results for a very small number of owners. And that's what keeps this date on collector radar. Let's talk about why the 1992 D penny still matters. First, age. While 1992 might not sound old, it's now over 3 decades in the past. Coins from this era were not widely saved in perfect condition, especially pennies. They were spent, scratched, dropped, rolled, and forgotten. So finding truly pristine examples today is harder than most people expect. Second, variety awareness. Over the years, collectors realized that subtle design changes occurred during production. That discovery turned everyday pennies into coins people started re-examining under magnification. This difference can completely change interest, because once collectors know something might exist, demand shifts fast. Third, grading premiums. Modern coins don't need to be ancient to be valuable. They need to be rare in top condition. And this is where the 1992 D penny quietly surprises people. In circulated condition, meaning it shows wear from normal use, a 1992 D penny is typically worth 1 to 3 cents. That's it. No mystery there. But in uncirculated condition, coins that never entered circulation values rise. A bright, clean example might sell for 50 cents to a few dollars. Certified mint state coins graded MS65 or MS66 can reach $10 to $40, depending on eye appeal and demand. Here's where many people get confused. In ultra-high grades, coins graded MS67 or better, values jump sharply. These are coins with almost no visible flaws, exceptional surfaces, and strong original luster. At auction, some of these high-grade 1992 D pennies have sold for hundreds of dollars. That's not because the date is rare, it's because perfection is rare. And when errors or unusual traits enter the picture, the numbers can move even higher. Let's talk about the kinds of things collectors quietly watch for on 1992 D pennies. First, die errors. These happen when minting equipment becomes damaged or misaligned. Examples include doubled letters, cracks, missing elements, or off-center strikes. Most errors are minor and add little value, but dramatic errors can bring tens or even hundreds of dollars, depending on visibility and condition. Second, strike quality. Some coins were struck more sharply than others. A 1992 D penny with unusually crisp details, especially in Lincoln's hair and beard, can command stronger prices when certified. Third, surface preservation. Zinc pennies are notorious for developing corrosion under the copper plating. Spots, bubbles, and peeling destroy value. Coins that avoided this damage are far scarcer than most people realize. This difference can completely change interest. Because while millions of 1992 D pennies were minted, only a tiny fraction survived in flawless condition. And collectors pay premiums for coins that look today the way they did the moment they left the mint. Now let's talk honestly about the famous 1992 varieties, because this is where rumors often run ahead of facts. The most well-known high-value 1992 penny is the 1992 Close AM variety from the Philadelphia Mint, not Denver. Some of those have sold for thousands of dollars. But the excitement surrounding that discovery caused collectors to re-examine all 1992 pennies, including those with D mint marks, looking for anomalies, transitional dies, and unusual reverse spacing. So far, confirmed Denver versions of the famous Close AM variety remain extremely rare and controversial, and most examples turn out to be normal coins. But this attention still elevated the status of 1992 as a whole, especially in top condition and with verified errors. This is where many people get confused. Seeing online headlines about 1992 penny worth thousands leads many owners to assume every coin from that year is valuable. In reality, only very specific coins, properly authenticated and certified, achieve those numbers. But that doesn't mean your 1992 D penny should be ignored. It means it should be examined carefully. Let's walk through realistic value ranges so expectations stay grounded. A circulated 1992 D penny, usually 1 to 3 cents. A clean uncirculated example, 50 cents to $3. Certified MS65 to MS66, $10 to $40. Certified MS67 or better, sometimes $100 to several $100s. Major mint errors or extraordinary strike anomalies, potentially higher depending on severity and demand. These are not guarantees. They're market snapshots, and the coin market moves based on condition, demand, and timing. But this difference can completely change interest, especially for people who have had rolls of pennies sitting untouched for decades. Now let's talk about mistakes that quietly destroy value, because this is where many people lose money without realizing it. First, cleaning coins. Scrubbing a penny with chemicals, baking soda, or cloth permanently damages the surface. Even if it looks shinier, collectors can spot cleaning instantly, and it can reduce value by 50% or more. Second, improper storage. Loose coins rubbing together cause scratches and dulling. Moisture creates corrosion, especially on zinc pennies like 1992 D. Once that damage sets in, it can't be reversed. Third, assuming condition doesn't matter. Many owners glance at their coin, see no obvious damage, and think it's perfect. But collectors look for microscopic flaws. A tiny nick or spot can drop a coin from a $200 grade to a $10 grade. This is where many people get confused, and where quiet wealth discovery sometimes slips away. Now let's talk about how patient sellers sometimes uncover unexpected income from coins like the 1992 D penny. Most high-value modern penny finds don't come from single coins in pocket change. They come from rolls that sat untouched in drawers, jars, or inherited collections. Someone finally opens them, examines each coin carefully, and realizes one example stands out, brighter, sharper, cleaner than the rest. They submit it for professional grading. And sometimes that coin comes back with a grade no one expected. That's when ordinary cents quietly become extraordinary assets, not overnight riches, not guaranteed outcomes, but real, documented cases where select examples produced life-changing sale results for patient owners who took time to learn what they had. Here's a detail collectors quietly watch: the Lincoln Memorial reverse. On 1992 pennies, the columns inside the memorial and the clarity of E+Pluribus matter. Weak strikes blur those details. Strong strikes preserve them. That clarity can be the difference between a mid-grade coin and a top population example. This difference can completely change interest, especially when auction records show collectors competing fiercely for the cleanest surviving examples of otherwise common dates. Now let's address one more important point. Online listings often show outrageous asking prices for 1992 pennies, sometimes thousands or even tens of thousands of dollars, with no sales history to back them up. Asking price is not value. Only completed, verified sales tell the real story. That's why knowledge matters more than speed. Rushing to sell without understanding condition, errors, and grading potential often leads to missed opportunities. But patient owners who research, compare certified examples, and consult reputable dealers put themselves in position for real outcomes, even from coins most people overlook. This is where many people get confused, but also where the smartest collectors quietly succeed. So what should you actually do if you own 1992 D pennies? First, look at condition. Is the coin bright, clean, and free from spots, corrosion, and scratches? Does it still have original mint luster? Second, examine details. Check Lincoln's face, the date, the mint mark, and the reverse lettering. Look for doubling, unusual spacing, or missing elements. Third, resist cleaning. Even if the coin looks dull, leave it alone. Fourth, consider professional grading only if the coin appears truly exceptional or has a dramatic error. Certification costs money, and only top-tier coins justify it. This difference can completely change interest and outcomes. Now here's the bigger picture. The 1992 D Lincoln penny isn't famous because every example is valuable. It's famous because a few exceptional ones rewrote expectations. It's a reminder that even modern coins can hide financial potential, not through hype, but through rarity, condition, and collector demand. And for people who grew up handling these coins every day, there's something powerful about realizing that small, forgotten objects can still hold quiet wealth discovery decades later. Not because everyone gets rich, but because knowledge turns ordinary into opportunity. Here's where many people get confused and where you can get ahead. The value isn't in the date alone. It's in the details, the surfaces, the strike, the errors, the grade. That's what separates a 1-cent coin from a $100 coin or more. So before you dismiss that 1992 D penny sitting in your drawer, take another look. Examine it under good light. Compare it to others from the same year. Learn what collectors quietly watch for, because sometimes the coins that seem most ordinary are the ones that surprise people the most. And if you're curious about other Lincoln pennies that have produced unexpected income, including some dates collectors quietly chase, watch the next video. You'll see how small details can create big differences, and how patience continues to outperform guesswork in the world of coin collecting. In the end, knowledge and time matter more than speed. Check your pennies carefully. Stay curious. And remember, hidden financial potential often lives in places most people never think to look. Most people assume a modern penny can't possibly be worth more than 1 cent. But every year, collectors quietly pay hundreds, and in rare situations, thousands, for specific Lincoln cents that most people overlook. And one of the dates that keeps resurfacing in auction searches is the 1988 Lincoln penny with no mint mark. Some verified examples have sold for unusually high prices compared to everyday pennies, and today, we're breaking down why. and how to tell whether yours is ordinary or something collectors actually compete for. This is where many people get confused, because when someone hears "no mint mark," they often assume that automatically means rare. But the truth is more interesting than that, and much more valuable for the people who understand what to look for. Let's start with the basics. The 1988 Lincoln cent was struck during one of the busiest years in U.S. mint history. More than 5 billion pennies were produced across all mints that year. The ones with no mint mark were made in Philadelphia, which traditionally doesn't use a mint mark on cents. So yes, millions of people own this exact coin, but collectors don't chase averages. They chase anomalies, preservation, and hidden details that most people never notice. Here's a detail collectors quietly watch. Condition matters more than date for most modern coins. A worn 1988 penny that's been in circulation for decades is usually worth face value. But a sharply struck, uncirculated example, especially one that's never been cleaned, can enter a completely different value tier. And when that condition lines up with certain varieties or errors, interest rises fast. This difference can completely change interest, because the 1988 penny sits in the middle of a transitional era for U.S. coin production. By this time, pennies were made almost entirely of zinc with a thin copper coating. That composition shift introduced striking challenges, plating errors, and surface anomalies that collectors now actively hunt for. This is where many people get confused, because two coins with the same date can look identical at first glance. Yet one might sell for a few cents, and another might attract three-figure bids. Let's talk about what separates ordinary examples from high-value ones. First, condition. A circulated 1988 penny, meaning it's been used, handled, and worn, typically sells for 1 to 5 cents. Even nicely circulated examples rarely break 10 cents unless they have a visible error. But uncirculated coins, especially those graded by professional services like PCGS or NGC, can sell for several dollars to over $50 depending on grade. Here's where it gets interesting. Some certified 1988 Philadelphia cents graded MS67 or higher have sold for surprisingly strong prices at auction, sometimes well over $100. And while those are not everyday outcomes, they show what happens when preservation meets collector demand. This is what people mean when they talk about quiet wealth discovery, not from every coin, but from select examples that survive in exceptional condition. This is where many people get confused, because most high-value modern pennies are not rare by mintage, they're rare by survival quality. Billions were made, but very few remain pristine after decades of circulation, storage, and mishandling. Now let's talk about varieties and errors, the real wildcard. Collectors pay special attention to off-center strikes, broad strikes, die cracks and die chips, weak or missing details, doubling in letters or dates. Some 1988 cents have shown minor doubled die characteristics, especially around the date and lettering. Most doubling is mechanical and adds no value, but true doubled dies, though rare, can create serious interest. This difference can completely change interest, because an ordinary penny becomes a variety coin, and variety coins attract a different category of buyer. Another detail collectors quietly watch is plating defects. Since these pennies were zinc with copper coating, errors like bubbling, peeling, or exposed zinc can sometimes signal minting mistakes rather than post-mint damage. And collectors pay for genuine mint errors, not damage, so knowing the difference matters. This is where many people get confused, because cleaning a coin instantly destroys much of its collectible value. Even a potentially valuable penny can lose most of its appeal if it's scrubbed, polished, or chemically treated. Ironically, the best way to preserve a coin is often to leave it alone. Now let's talk realistic values. Most 1988 no-mint mark pennies in circulation face value to 5 cents. Uncirculated examples, $1 to $5. High-grade certified coins, $10 to over $100. Major mint errors or rare varieties, potentially several $100s, and in rare cases more, depending on demand and verification. This is where patience matters, because most high-end sales don't happen overnight. Many sellers only discover their coin's hidden financial potential after years of storage, careful handling, and finally submitting it for grading when the market demand lines up. That's what leads to life-changing sale results for select examples, not hype, but timing, condition, and rarity intersecting. Here's a detail collectors quietly watch: the strike quality on Lincoln's hair and beard. Weak strikes reduce value. Sharp details increase it. That alone can double or triple interest between two coins from the same year. Another mistake owners make is assuming color doesn't matter. But copper color classification, red, red-brown, or brown, dramatically impacts value. Bright red original luster coins sell for much more than brown-toned examples, even at the same grade. This is where many people get confused, because storage matters just as much as minting. Coins kept in paper rolls, plastic flips, or albums often survive better than coins left loose in jars, drawers, or pockets. And this is why some people quietly discover unexpected income years later, not because they were chasing rare coins, but because they unknowingly preserved something collectors later wanted. Now let's talk psychology. Collectors love dates that sit right before major design changes. The Lincoln Memorial Reverse, used from 1959 through 2008, represents one of the longest-running coin designs in U.S. history. Coins from the 1980s fall into a nostalgia window, old enough to feel historic, modern enough to still exist in high condition. That combination keeps demand steady, especially among collectors rebuilding childhood coin sets. This difference can completely change interest, because demand doesn't always come from rarity alone. It comes from emotional connection, completion goals, and collector trends. And here's something most people never hear. Some collectors specifically hunt for high-grade examples of common-date coins, because registry-set competitions reward condition rarity. That means a coin with billions minted can still be rare at the highest grades, and rare coins attract strong bidding. This is where many people get confused, because rarity isn't just about how many were made. It's about how many survive in elite condition. Now let's walk through what you should actually do if you have a 1988 no-mint mark penny. First, don't clean it. Second, look at it under good lighting and magnification. Check for doubling in the date and lettering. Look for off-center strikes, cracks, or unusual surfaces. Examine Lincoln's hair and cheekbone. Sharp details matter. Check the color. Red coins carry premiums. If something looks unusual, that's when professional grading or a trusted coin dealer becomes valuable. Even if it turns out to be common, you've learned something. And if it isn't, you may have uncovered hidden financial potential sitting unnoticed for decades. This is where patience outperforms speed. Many people rush to sell and get pennies for their pennies, literally. But informed sellers, especially those who understand grading standards and market timing, often see far better results. That's how quiet wealth discovery actually happens in coin collecting, not overnight, but through knowledge and discipline. And here's the truth most honest collectors will tell you. Most 1988 pennies are not rare. Most are not valuable. But some, based on condition, error, or variety, absolutely are. And the only way to know which category yours falls into is to look carefully, learn what matters, and avoid damaging mistakes. That's why this date continues to attract attention, not because every coin is special, but because some are. And those select examples are what keep collectors searching rolls, jars, and drawers decades later. This difference can completely change interest, because one overlooked coin can turn into a story not just of value but of discovery. So take a moment after this video. Pull out your change jar. Look at your 1988 pennies. Study the surfaces. Compare sharpness. Look for the unusual. Because even if you don't find something extraordinary, you'll gain something better: knowledge. And that's what separates casual owners from informed collectors. And if you want to continue learning which Lincoln cents have created life-changing sale results for select examples, watch the next video in this series, where we break down another everyday-looking penny that quietly shocked the market. Because in coin collecting, knowledge doesn't just protect value. Sometimes it creates it. Most people think pennies are pocket change, something you ignore, toss in a jar, or leave in a drawer for years. But every once in a while, one quiet, ordinary-looking coin surprises the entire collecting world. Today, we're talking about the 1985 Lincoln penny with the D Mint mark, a coin that millions of Americans already own. Yet a small number of verified examples have sold for unusually high prices. Not because of hype, not because of rumors, but because of tiny details most people never notice. And by the end of this video, you'll know exactly what collectors look for and why this single penny has become a quiet source of curiosity, opportunity, and in rare cases, life-changing sale results for select examples. Let's start with the moment this coin was born. The year 1985 sat right in the middle of America's modern penny era. Gas prices were low, the economy was stabilizing, and the Lincoln Memorial penny had already been circulating for more than 2 decades. The Denver Mint struck over 5 billion pennies that year, which is why the 1985 D penny feels common today. But this is where many people get confused. High mintage doesn't always mean low value. In fact, when millions of coins exist, the tiniest differences suddenly matter, and collectors start paying attention to things most people never check. The 1985 D Lincoln cent is made of copper-plated zinc, about 97.5% zinc with a thin copper coating. To the naked eye, it looks identical to other pennies from the 1980s. Abraham Lincoln's portrait faces right on the front, and the Lincoln Memorial sits quietly on the back. Nothing flashy, nothing dramatic. But collectors don't look at coins the way most people do. They look for precision, condition, and, most importantly, mistakes. And here's a detail collectors quietly watch. 1985 was a year when the U.S. Mint was transitioning through massive production demands. Speed mattered, efficiency mattered. And when speed increases, small errors sometimes slip through unnoticed. Most of those errors get caught. Some don't. And the few that escape into circulation become the coins people talk about decades later. This difference can completely change interest. A standard circulated 1985 D penny, the kind that's been passed around for years, usually trades for just a few cents above face value. Even uncirculated rolls are widely available. But when collectors find coins with unusual strike characteristics, doubling, off-center designs, or extreme mint state preservation, values can rise fast, sometimes dramatically. This is where many people get confused. They hear 1985 penny sold for hundreds or thousands, and assume every coin from that year must be valuable. That's not how the market works. Value comes from rarity within condition, not just from the date itself. And the 1985 D penny is a perfect example of how quiet wealth discovery happens, not through luck, but through careful inspection and patience. Let's talk about what separates common examples from high-value ones. First, condition. Most pennies from the 1980s show wear. Even coins that look clean often have microscopic scratches, dull surfaces, or softened details. But coins graded MS67, MS68, or higher, meaning mint state with near-perfect surfaces, are extremely scarce. When collectors want registry-quality coins, competition increases and prices climb. In recent years, certified high-grade examples of the 1985 D penny have sold for hundreds of dollars, and in rare top-grade cases, even more. Not because the coin is rare in quantity, but because flawless survivors are rare in reality. That's where patient sellers sometimes discover unexpected income, not from hoarding boxes of coins, but from finding one exceptional piece hiding in plain sight. Here's a detail collectors quietly watch strike quality. The Denver Mint produced billions of coins in 1985, but not all strikes were equal. Some coins show weak lettering, soft details in Lincoln's hair, or blurred lines in the memorial columns. Others appear crisp, sharp, and well-defined, and collectors will often pay significantly more for those. Two pennies can look identical to the casual eye, but one can command several times the price of the other. This difference can completely change interest. Next, doubling and variety errors. Some 1985 pennies have been reported with minor doubling, especially in the date, motto, or lettering. Most are machine doubling, which carries little premium. But true doubled dies, where the die itself was misaligned during production, are a different story. Verified doubled die varieties, even subtle ones, can attract serious collector attention and drive prices much higher than ordinary examples. This is where many people get confused. Not every doubled-looking letter is valuable. Many coins show flat, shelf-like doubling caused by machine vibration, not true hub doubling. The only way to know is through magnification, reference guides, or professional verification. But when true doubled dies surface, collectors quietly take notice, because they represent coins that were never supposed to exist. Another category that drives interest: off-center strikes and broad strikes. A small percentage of 1985 D pennies were struck off-center, sometimes leaving part of the design missing or shifted. Mild off-centers might sell for modest premiums, but dramatic examples, where 30 to 50% of the design is missing but the date is still visible, can bring surprisingly strong prices. Not thousands in most cases, but enough to make people rethink what just a penny really means. Here's a detail collectors quietly watch: plating errors. Because these pennies are copper-plated zinc, sometimes the copper coating fails, leading to blistered surfaces, peeling layers, or exposed gray zinc beneath. While minor plating flaws are common, extreme errors, such as missing plating on one entire side, can attract serious attention. Some have sold for strong premiums, especially when certified. This difference can completely change interest. Now let's talk about realistic value ranges, because credibility matters. A circulated 1985 D penny typically trades at face value 1 cent, or just slightly more if sold in bulk. Uncirculated examples often range from 5 to 25 cents. But certified mint-state coins in higher grades can sell from $50 to several $100s, depending on condition, demand, and timing. Error coins, rare varieties, or top population registry coins have achieved even stronger results, not because they're common, but because they're exceptional. This is where many people get confused. Online listings asking thousands of dollars don't mean those prices are real. Only completed, verified sales matter. And the real opportunity isn't in chasing hype. It's in learning what collectors actually value and quietly checking what you already own. Now let's talk about mistakes owners make that reduce value. The biggest mistake: cleaning coins. Even gentle rubbing can destroy original surfaces and cut value by half or more. Collectors want originality, not shine. Another mistake is improper storage. Pennies tossed into drawers, jars, or plastic bags rub against each other, creating scratches that permanently reduce grade potential. And finally, many people sell too fast, assuming a coin isn't valuable without checking condition, variety, or certification options. This difference can completely change interest, because sometimes patience creates opportunity. There are stories, verified, documented, of people finding high-grade or error pennies in old collections, desk drawers, or inherited jars. Not because they were searching for treasure, but because they finally took time to look carefully. That's how quiet wealth discovery works: not overnight, not guaranteed, but real enough to matter. Here's a detail collectors quietly watch: timing. Coin markets move. Demand rises when registry sets grow popular. Interest spikes when varieties get newly recognized. A penny that sells for $80 one year might sell for $250 another, not because the coin changed, but because collector focus did. That's why patient sellers sometimes see unexpected income, not by rushing, but by waiting for the right moment. This is where many people get confused. They assume valuable coins must look old, gold, or dramatic. But some of the most interesting modern coin discoveries come from ordinary-looking pennies, coins people ignore because they seem too recent to matter. The 1985 D penny quietly proves that age alone doesn't define potential. So what should you actually check on your own coins? First, look at the date 1985 and the mint mark under the date. If there's a small D, it came from Denver. Next, examine the condition under bright light. Are Lincoln's hairlines sharp? Is the memorial crisp? Are there scratches, stains, or dull surfaces? Then check for doubling, especially on the date and lettering, and look for off-center strikes, missing plating, or unusual textures. This difference can completely change interest, because even if your penny isn't rare, learning what makes coins valuable changes how you see every coin afterward. Now here's the most important part. Most 1985 D pennies will never be worth more than face value. But a small percentage, the ones with rare errors, top-tier condition, or unusual varieties, have already achieved impressive results, including life-changing sale results for select examples. Not because of luck, but because of knowledge, attention, and patience. And that's why this coin still matters today. Not because everyone gets rich, not because every penny is valuable, but because occasionally, quietly, a single coin surprises someone who thought they were just holding change. So tonight, when you open a drawer, tip over a jar, or look through an old collection, take an extra moment. Check your 1985 pennies. Look closely, because even if nothing turns up, you've gained something better: understanding. And in the world of coins, knowledge always outlasts hype. If you found this helpful, there's another penny video waiting that dives into a different date collectors are quietly watching right now. And it might surprise you even more than this one. Because when it comes to coins, patience matters more than speed, and curiosity often leads to the most unexpected discoveries. Most people glance at a penny and see 1 cent. But a small group of collectors know that certain everyday coins, including one very specific date, have quietly sold for amounts that surprise even experienced buyers. Today, we're looking at the 1979 D Mint Mark Lincoln penny. Not because everyone is rare, but because select examples, under the right conditions, have produced life-changing sale results. And what makes this story fascinating is how ordinary these coins look, which means many people may have handled one without ever realizing its hidden financial potential. Before you dismiss this coin, stay with me, because the difference between a common penny and one collectors compete for often comes down to details that most people never notice. The 1979 Lincoln penny was minted during a time when American coinage was undergoing subtle changes. Inflation was rising, mint production was high, and billions of cents were struck for everyday use. The Denver Mint alone produced over 3.6 billion pennies that year. That means most 1979 D pennies are common and worth face value in circulation. But this is where many people get confused. High mintage does not always mean low collector interest. In fact, certain high-grade examples and specific varieties from large production years can become surprisingly valuable, because few people save them in perfect condition, and even fewer understand which details actually matter. The 1979 penny is made of 95% copper and 5% zinc, which makes it heavier and compositionally different from later Lincoln cents. That alone makes it appealing to collectors who focus on Pennies 1,982 copper issues. But the real attention comes from surface quality, strike sharpness, and rare varieties that quietly drive auction competition behind the scenes. Here's a detail collectors quietly watch. The mint mark placement, lettering clarity, and date style on 1979 pennies can vary in ways that dramatically affect desirability, especially in uncirculated condition. Let's talk about the mint mark first. A D under the date means the coin was struck in Denver. Most circulated examples sell for 1 to 3 cents. Even lightly worn ones rarely exceed a quarter. But coins in pristine, untouched condition, especially those graded by professional services, can reach dramatically higher levels depending on quality. And this difference can completely change interest. Certified 1979 D pennies graded MS65 or MS66, meaning mint state with strong luster and minimal marks, can sell for $10 to $40. That may not sound shocking until you realize how rare truly perfect examples are from a year when almost nobody saved rolls in original condition. But then we enter the territory collectors really chase, MS67 and above. At that level, small surface details, strike sharpness, and color quality become decisive. Select examples have sold at auction for hundreds, and in rare cases over $1,000, when bidding competition aligns with top-tier grading. This is where many people get confused. Most 1979 pennies are common, but exceptional ones are scarce. And scarcity in top condition is what drives serious collector demand. Now let's talk about varieties, because this is where hidden financial potential quietly exists. In 1979, the U.S. Mint produced two major design styles for the Lincoln cent date, what collectors call the wide date and the narrow date. These terms refer to the spacing and shape of the numerals in the year. On narrow date examples, the numbers appear tighter, more compact, and closer together, especially noticeable in the 9 and 7. The narrow date variety is scarcer, and collectors actively seek it, especially when paired with high-grade condition and strong copper color. While most raw examples sell for modest premiums, certified narrow-date coins in top condition have produced life-changing sale results for select examples, not because they're mythical rarities, but because so few survive in pristine form. Here's a detail collectors quietly watch: color designation. Professional graders classify copper coins as red, red-brown, or brown based on surface oxidation. Full red examples, especially from circulation-heavy years like 1979, are significantly harder to find. And when a narrow-date coin retains full red luster and earns a high grade, auction results can climb sharply. This difference can completely change interest. Now let's talk realistically about value ranges, because credibility matters. Most circulated 1979 D pennies are worth face value. Lightly uncirculated examples might bring 50 cents to $2. Certified MS65 examples often sell in the $10 to $20 range. MS66 examples can climb into the $30 to $75 range, depending on color quality and eye appeal. But MS67 examples, especially narrow-date varieties with strong red color, can sell for several $100s or more when demand spikes. And in select cases, record-setting examples have crossed into four-figure territory. Not every coin will do this, but some absolutely have. And this is where many people make costly mistakes. One of the biggest mistakes is cleaning. Even gentle rubbing with a cloth can permanently damage the coin's surface, destroying original luster and slashing collector value. Another mistake is assuming all shiny pennies are valuable. Brightness alone does not equal rarity or grade. Collectors care about microscopic surface preservation, strike quality, and originality, not just shine. Another mistake owners make is spending coins that look ordinary without checking for varieties. The narrow date difference is subtle. Many people unknowingly return potentially collectible coins to circulation because they never examine the date spacing or compare styles. This is where patience matters more than speed. Some of the most profitable coin discoveries didn't happen overnight. They happened when someone carefully sorted inherited jars, old bank rolls, or childhood collections, and quietly realized they had a high-grade or rare variety example hiding in plain sight. This difference can completely change interest. Another factor collectors watch closely is strike quality. On some 1979 pennies, Lincoln's hair detail, jawline, and the lettering in Liberty can appear weak or flat. Strongly struck coins with crisp detail and full separation bring significantly more money, especially in higher grades. Here's a detail collectors quietly watch: rim thickness and planchet quality. Some 1979 coins show minor planchet defects or weak rims, which reduce desirability. But well-centered, sharp-rimmed coins with clean fields stand out in auctions, even when the date itself is common. Now let's talk about real-world buyer behavior. Collectors don't chase hype. They chase condition, originality, and verified scarcity. When a population report shows only a few dozen coins graded at a certain level, especially in red condition, demand increases naturally. That's when quiet wealth discovery happens, not through speculation but through patience and knowledge. This is where many people get confused. Value doesn't come from age alone. It comes from survival. Billions were minted in 1979, but only a tiny fraction remain untouched, perfectly preserved, and properly identified today. And that fraction is what creates opportunity. Another area collectors watch closely is transitional era consistency. The late 1970s saw subtle changes in dies, strikes, and quality control. Coins that escaped heavy bag marks, contact damage, and surface dulling became the exception, not the rule. This difference can completely change interest. Now let's talk about how sellers sometimes uncover unexpected income. Many high-value penny sales didn't come from people chasing jackpots. They came from people who took time to learn, compare, and verify what they owned. Someone rolling through inherited wheat cents might stumble upon nothing unusual until they notice one coin with unusually sharp detail, bright original color, and a narrow date format. After professional grading, that same coin might enter a completely different financial category. Not guaranteed, not common, but very real. That's what makes coins like the 1979 penny so interesting. They sit at the intersection of common circulation history and rare survival. Most are ordinary, a few are extraordinary, and the only way to tell is through careful observation. Here's a detail collectors quietly watch: the weight. A genuine 1979 copper cent should weigh about 3.11 grams. Deviations may indicate planchet errors or damage. While most weight differences come from wear, occasionally unusual examples surface, and those always deserve closer inspection. This difference can completely change interest. Let's talk about grading, because this is another place people lose value without realizing it. Professional grading services evaluate surface preservation, strike sharpness, luster, color, and eye appeal. Two coins that look identical to the naked eye can differ by hundreds of dollars once professionally graded. That's why advanced collectors rarely rely on casual judgment, and why certified examples dominate high-end auction results. But grading only makes sense if a coin already appears exceptional. Submitting average circulated pennies usually costs more than the coin is worth. Knowledge and patience matter more than speed. This is where many people get confused. Now let's step back and ask the bigger question. Why does this coin still matter? Because the 1979 penny represents something bigger than just copper and zinc. It represents how everyday objects can carry hidden financial potential, not because they're magical, but because scarcity develops naturally over time as coins circulate, degrade, and disappear. That's why collectors still study dates like this. Not because every example is valuable, but because a few quietly outperform expectations when condition, variety, and timing align. This difference can completely change interest. And here's what makes this especially powerful for everyday people. These coins are still out there, in old jars, in inherited collections, in forgotten rolls. The opportunity isn't about chasing fantasies, it's about learning how to recognize what others overlook. That's where quiet wealth discovery happens. Now, before we wrap up, let's summarize what truly separates common from valuable when it comes to the 1979 D penny. First, condition. Uncirculated coins with strong luster and no surface damage matter most. Second, variety. Narrow date examples draw stronger collector attention than wide date ones. Third, color. Full red copper surfaces dramatically increase value potential. Fourth, strike quality. Sharp details and clean fields matter more than shine alone. And fifth, authentication. Professional grading turns uncertainty into market confidence. Miss even one of these and a coin that could have been special becomes just another penny. This is where many people get confused, but now you know what to look for. So here's what I want you to do next. Pull out your pennies. Check your 1979 coins. Look closely at the date spacing. Look at the mint mark. Look at the color, surface quality, and sharpness of Lincoln's features. You don't need hundreds of coins. Sometimes one well-preserved piece can quietly outperform thousands of ordinary ones. And if you want to keep learning which pennies collectors actually watch, including other dates that have produced life-changing sale results for select examples, watch the next video in this series. Because the real advantage in coin collecting isn't speed, it's knowledge, patience, and attention to detail. And sometimes, the smallest coin in your pocket carries the biggest surprise. If you've ever tossed a 1976 Lincoln penny into a jar without a second thought, you're not alone. But what many people don't realize is that some verified examples of this exact coin, especially with the Denver mint mark, have sold for prices that surprised even longtime collectors. Not because every coin is rare, but because a small group of them quietly stand apart. And today, we're breaking down what makes the 1976 Lincoln Cent one of the most misunderstood pennies in American history, and why checking yours carefully could reveal hidden financial potential. This story begins in the mid-1970s, a time when the U.S. Mint was producing billions of coins every year. America was celebrating its bicentennial, inflation was rising, and pocket change was moving faster than ever. In 1976, the Denver Mint struck more than 4 billion Lincoln cents alone. That massive production is why most people assume this coin has no real value beyond face value. But this is where many people get confused, because rarity in coin collecting isn't always about how many were made. It's about how many survive in the right condition, with the right characteristics, and sometimes with the right mistakes. The 1976 Lincoln penny features Abraham Lincoln on the front and the Lincoln Memorial on the back, a design that ran from 1959 to 2008. Most were made of copper-plated zinc, part of the composition change that began in 1982, but in 1976, the Mint was still producing mostly bronze cents, 95% copper, 5% zinc and tin. That heavier copper content gives these coins a solid feel and makes them especially popular among collectors who prefer classic materials. Here's a detail collectors quietly watch. Even among common-looking coins, composition and strike quality can dramatically affect value. Most 1976 pennies you'll find in circulation are worn, scratched, or discolored. These typically trade for just 1 or 2 cents, maybe a little more in bulk. But when you move into higher-grade examples, coins that were never circulated, never damaged, and still retain their original mint luster, values begin to climb. In certified mint state condition, especially grades like M. Sminnis 65 and above, 1976 Lincoln cents have sold for tens, sometimes hundreds of dollars. And in rare, exceptional cases, coins with top population rankings or unusual mint errors, some have reached prices that collectors consider life-changing sale results for select examples. This difference can completely change interest, and most people never look closely enough to notice. Let's talk about mint marks for a moment. The D beneath the date means this penny was struck in Denver. Philadelphia also produced cents in 1976, but those coins carry no mint mark. While neither version is rare in average condition, Denver coins sometimes display sharper strikes, and certain varieties have drawn special attention in the collector market. This is where many people get confused, because not all high-value coins look dramatic or damaged. In fact, many of the most valuable examples look perfectly normal to the untrained eye. Collectors especially watch for errors and varieties. These include doubled dies, off-center strikes, clip planchets, weak strikes, and planchet flaws. While none of these are guaranteed on any given coin, verified examples of 1970-60 cents with these characteristics have sold for strong premiums, sometimes hundreds or even thousands of dollars depending on severity, visibility, and condition. Here's a detail collectors quietly watch: doubling on Lincoln's date, lettering, or the word Liberty can dramatically increase interest. But this doubling must be confirmed. Machine doubling doesn't count, and that's where many sellers get disappointed. Condition is everything. A 1970-60 penny pulled from pocket change with wear on Lincoln's cheek and flat spots on the memorial is almost always worth face value. But a sharply struck coin with blazing red surfaces, clean fields, and strong detail, especially one graded by PCGS or NGC, becomes something very different in the eyes of buyers. This difference can completely change interest, because collectors pay premiums for preservation, not age alone. In today's realistic market, here's what value ranges often look like. Heavily circulated examples usually trade at 1 cent to 5 cents. Clean but circulated coins may bring 10 to 25 cents in bulk. Uncirculated rolls can bring a few dollars. Certified mint state coins, especially M. Smith's 64 to M. Smith's 66, often sell from $10 to over $100 depending on color designation and eye appeal. And rare error coins, verified and properly graded, can reach several $100s or more, with select examples achieving quiet wealth discovery levels for the right seller at the right time. This is where patience matters most. Many high-end results don't come from rushing to sell, they come from careful evaluation, authentication, and timing. But here's where many people make costly mistakes. One of the biggest is cleaning coins. Polishing a penny with chemicals, toothpaste, or abrasives might make it shiny, but it destroys the original surface. Once that happens, collectors often walk away and the value drops sharply. Another mistake is assuming online listings equal real value. Anyone can list a penny for $10,000. What matters is verified sales, not asking prices. Serious collectors rely on auction records, population reports, and certified grading standards, not social media hype. Here's a detail collectors quietly watch: natural color. Original red, red-brown, and brown surfaces matter enormously. Artificial shine signals damage, even if the coin looks bright. Many owners also overlook errors entirely. A slight off-center strike, weak rim, or strange texture may look like damage, but in some cases, it's a mint error that collectors actively pursue. This difference can completely change interest, and most people never check closely enough to realize what they're holding. What makes the 1970-60 penny especially fascinating is that it sits at the crossroads of modern and classic coinage. It's old enough to feel historic to many Americans, yet common enough that millions still sit unnoticed in jars, drawers, and inherited collections. That combination creates opportunity, not guaranteed riches, but quiet financial potential for patient owners who understand what they're looking for. This is where many people get confused, because valuable coins don't announce themselves. They don't glow, and they don't come with certificates. They look ordinary until someone with knowledge takes a closer look. Some collectors have discovered unexpected income by submitting a handful of clean coins for grading, only to find one example stood out far beyond the rest. Not because it was old, but because it was exceptional. That's how life-changing sale results for select examples happen, slowly, carefully, and rarely, but they do happen. Here's a detail collectors quietly watch strike sharpness. Look at Lincoln's beard, cheekbone, and bow tie. Look at the memorial columns on the reverse. Strong detail and clean separation often indicate a higher quality strike, which drives desirability even among common dates. Another factor is eye appeal. Two coins with the same technical grade can sell for wildly different prices based on toning, color balance, and surface clarity. This difference can completely change interest, even when everything else appears identical. The truth is, most 1976 pennies will never be worth more than pocket change. But a small number, through condition, rarity of error, or exceptional preservation, carry hidden financial potential that most people never discover simply because they never look closely enough. And that's why this coin still matters to collectors today. It's not about hype. It's about possibility. It's about understanding how ordinary objects sometimes become extraordinary, not through luck, but through knowledge and patience. So here's what you should do next. Take out your 1976 pennies. Look for the small D beneath the date. Check the surfaces under good light. Look for doubling, off-center strikes, strong detail, or unusual textures. Don't clean anything. If a coin looks unusually sharp, bright in a natural way, or different from the rest, set it aside. That's how quiet wealth discovery begins, not with assumptions but with careful attention. And if you want to learn about other overlooked pennies that have surprised collectors with life-changing sale results for select examples, make sure to watch the next video. Because some of the most interesting discoveries come from dates most people ignore entirely. Knowledge and patience always matter more than speed. Most people walk right past pennies without giving them a second thought. They sit in jars, drawers, cup holders, and old coffee cans, forgotten. But what if I told you that some verified 1970 Lincoln pennies with a D mint mark have sold for prices that completely shock their owners? Not because everyone is rare, but because a small number of very specific examples quietly crossed into collector demand territory. And this is where things get interesting, because many people already own this coin without realizing its hidden financial potential. Today, we're taking a close look at the 1970 D Abraham Lincoln penny. Not hype, not exaggeration, just the real story behind why collectors still watch this date, how some examples achieve life-changing sale results, and what separates everyday cents from coins that create quiet wealth discovery. Stay with me, because in a few minutes, I'll explain the small details that can completely change how this coin is valued. And this is where many people get confused. The year 1970 sits at an important turning point in American coin history. The U.S. Mint had recently transitioned away from silver in circulating coins, and copper-based coinage was still standard for pennies. The Lincoln Memorial reverse design was in full production, and the Denver Mint struck over 2.5 billion pennies that year. Yes, billion. With a B, that massive number is exactly why most 1970 D pennies are worth only face value today. But here's the detail collectors quietly watch. Even in high mintage years, certain strikes, errors, and conditions can transform ordinary coins into serious collectibles. And the 1970 D penny happens to sit right at the center of several categories that collectors actively track. This difference can completely change interest, and it's not something you can spot by glancing at the date alone. The D mint mark under the date tells us the coin was struck in Denver. These pennies are made of 95% copper and 5% zinc, a heavier, richer copper composition than modern cents. Many collectors prefer this era because the coins feel substantial, age beautifully, and carry stronger market demand in higher grades. But this is where many people get confused. Value doesn't come from age alone. It comes from condition, rarity within condition, and sometimes unexpected minting varieties that escaped public attention for years. One of the most watched features on 1970 pennies is strike quality. Some Denver mint examples were weakly struck, with soft details in Lincoln's hair and jawline. Others, however, were struck sharply with full detail, and those are the ones collectors quietly compete for. Here's a detail collectors quietly watch. Look at Lincoln's cheekbone, beard line, and the word Liberty. If those areas are crisp and fully defined, the coin immediately becomes more interesting in the marketplace, especially when combined with clean surfaces and minimal wear. This difference can completely change interest. Now let's talk about varieties, because this is where unexpected income sometimes enters the picture. While the famous small date variety is associated with Philadelphia coins, Denver pennies from 1970 still have collectible varieties related to die doubling, repunched mint marks, and strike anomalies. Some examples show doubling in the lettering of Liberty or in the date itself, subtle but real. These aren't fantasy errors. They're documented by professional grading services and actively searched for by specialists. And this is where many people get confused. Doubling caused by machine vibration is common and adds little value. True double die varieties, however, show clear separation and thickness, and that's what collectors pay for. This difference can completely change interest. Let's talk numbers realistically, not sensationally. A typical circulated 1970 penny, even in nice condition, usually sells for 1 to 3 cents. That's normal. That's expected. But uncirculated examples with strong luster and clean surfaces often trade in the $1 to $5 range. When you reach premium mint state levels, coins graded MS66 or higher by professional services, prices can climb into the tens or even hundreds of dollars. Now here's the part most people don't expect. A small number of exceptionally preserved examples, especially those with top-tier strike quality or recognized varieties, have achieved four-figure results at auction. Not common, not guaranteed, but verified. And this is where the idea of quiet wealth discovery begins, because collectors aren't chasing age, they're chasing condition scarcity. There may be billions of 1970 pennies, but only a tiny fraction survive in near-perfect condition. This difference can completely change interest. Now let's talk about mistakes, because this is where value is often lost before anyone realizes what they had. One of the most common mistakes is cleaning. Even light polishing with a cloth can permanently damage a coin's surface. Cleaning removes the original mint luster that collectors pay for and replaces it with unnatural shine, and that usually cuts value dramatically. Another mistake is improper storage. Copper is sensitive to moisture and oils from skin contact. Tossing coins into plastic bags, coin jars, or damp environments can lead to spotting, discoloration, and corrosion, damage that cannot be reversed. And this is where many people get confused. A shiny coin is not always a valuable coin. Collectors prefer original surfaces over brightness. That natural glow, not mirror shine, is what commands premiums. This difference can completely change interest. Another overlooked factor is authentication. Some owners assume their coin is special, but without professional verification, buyers won't pay premium prices. On the other hand, some owners dismiss coins that later turn out to be high-grade or variety examples simply because they didn't know what to look for. This is why patient sellers sometimes discover unexpected income, not by rushing to sell, but by carefully evaluating, learning, and confirming what they own. Let's walk through how collectors typically evaluate a 1970 penny. First, they look at wear. Does Lincoln's cheek show flattening? Are the jawline and coat details sharp? If yes, the coin may still qualify as uncirculated. Second, they check surface quality. Are there deep scratches, dark spots, or corrosion? Clean surfaces matter more than color tone. Third, they inspect strike quality. Is the hair detail crisp? Is Liberty bold? Is the mint mark clear and centered? Fourth, And this is where many people get confused. They examine for varieties. Magnification reveals doubling, die chips, or unusual features that the naked eye often misses. Each one of these factors compounds value. Miss one and the price drops. Get them all and suddenly you're in collector territory. This difference can completely change interest. Now let's address the phrase you've probably heard before. Some pennies sold for thousands. Yes, but context matters. The coins that reach those levels are typically top-graded examples, MS67 or higher, with extraordinary surface quality, eye appeal, and strike. Some also carry rare varieties or exceptional provenance. These are not everyday finds, but they are real and documented, which is why collectors keep searching old collections, rolls, and inherited jars. And this is where the concept of hidden financial potential becomes real, not because everyone gets rich, but because rare survivors exist inside common-looking groups. This difference can completely change interest. Another factor people overlook is timing. The coin market moves in cycles. Demand for Lincoln cents rises when new collectors enter the hobby, when copper prices fluctuate, and when registry competition intensifies. Coins that sell for modest amounts today may command significantly higher prices years later, especially top-grade survivors. This is why knowledge and patience matter more than speed. The best results usually come to people who take time to learn, preserve, and confirm what they own. Now let's talk about real-world scenarios, because this is where things get practical. Many high-grade Lincoln cents discovered today come from old mint sets, bank rolls, or family collections assembled decades ago and forgotten. The owners weren't looking for wealth, they were saving coins. And decades later, those same coins became quiet financial discoveries simply because they survived untouched. This difference can completely change interest. Another overlooked group is collectors who inherited coins and assumed pennies had no value. Some of the strongest examples ever graded came from estates where coins were stored properly and never circulated. And this is where many people get confused. Rarity isn't always about how many were minted, it's about how many survived in elite condition. Now let's talk about what to do if you think you might have a strong 1970D penny. First, handle it carefully by the edges. Never rub the surfaces. Never clean it. Second, examine it under good lighting and magnification. Look for sharp details, clean fields, and any signs of doubling or unusual features. Third, compare it to certified examples online from trusted auction houses or grading services. That gives you a realistic reference point, not speculation. Fourth, if the coin appears uncirculated and unusually sharp, professional grading may be worth considering, especially if you're seeing few or no flaws. This is where patient sellers sometimes discover unexpected income, not by rushing to sell raw coins, but by confirming quality and letting the market decide. And here's another detail collectors quietly watch: originality. Coins that haven't been cleaned, altered, or damaged tend to outperform similar coins that have been improved. Natural surfaces beat artificial shine every time. This difference can completely change interest. Now let's address something important: expectations. Most 1970D pennies are common. That's the truth. But small percentages of any large mintage become condition rarities, and even smaller percentages become standout survivors. Those are the coins that bring strong premiums, not because of hype, but because collectors compete for the best examples available. That's why some examples achieve life-changing sale results for select owners, not because the date is rare, but because the condition and quality are rare. And this is where quiet wealth discovery becomes possible, not through luck, but through learning and preservation. Let's talk briefly about copper value, because people often ask. Yes, Pennies 1,982 pennies contain more copper than modern cents, but their metal value alone doesn't justify selling. The real opportunity comes from collector demand, not melt value, and that demand focuses on originality, strike quality, and condition. This difference can completely change interest. Before we wrap up, here's something most people don't realize. Even coins that aren't worth much today can become important learning tools. The more examples you examine, the better you become at spotting high-quality pieces when they appear. That skill alone increases your chances of identifying real opportunities over time. And that's why collectors say the true value isn't just in the coins, it's in the knowledge. So here's the bottom line. The 1970 Lincoln penny is one of the most overlooked coins in American change, not because it's rare, but because it's common enough to hide rare survivors. While most examples remain worth only face value, select coins in exceptional condition or with recognized varieties have achieved serious collector prices. And that's what makes this date quietly fascinating. If you have old pennies, take another look. Check your jars, check your drawers, check your inherited collections. You don't need to rush. You don't need to speculate. Just observe carefully because sometimes hidden financial potential reveals itself slowly. And if you want to continue learning, watch our next video on another overlooked Lincoln cent date that surprised collectors in ways no one expected. Because in this hobby, patience and knowledge always outperform speed, and sometimes, quiet discoveries turn out to be the most meaningful ones of all. If you've ever glanced at a penny from the early 1960s and thought, this probably isn't worth much, this video might change how you look at your pocket change forever. Because today, we're talking about the 1961 Lincoln penny with the D mint mark, a coin most people overlook, but one that has quietly produced some surprisingly high sale results for select examples. Not everyone, of course, but a small group of these coins has shown real collector demand and hidden financial potential. And this is where many people get confused, because the difference between ordinary and extraordinary is often something most owners never think to check. Let's start with the story behind this coin. The year 1961 sits in an interesting moment in American history. The country was entering a new decade, the space race was heating up, and everyday Americans were using Lincoln pennies in grocery stores, vending machines, and payphones without giving them a second thought. These coins were minted in massive numbers, especially at the Denver Mint, where the D mint mark comes from, and that's exactly why most people assume they're common and forgettable. But here's a detail collectors quietly watch. High mintage does not always mean low value. Sometimes it means rare survivors in top condition, unusual minting characteristics, or overlooked varieties that slip through unnoticed for decades. And the 1961 D penny happens to check more than one of those boxes. This is where many people get confused, because when they hear valuable coin, they imagine something ancient or gold. But in the coin world, modern-era pennies can become valuable not because they're old, but because of condition, scarcity in premium grades, and subtle minting details that most people never notice. The 1961 D Lincoln cent was struck in copper, about 95% copper and 5% zinc, making it heavier and richer in metal content than today's pennies. It weighs about 3.11 grams and features the classic Lincoln Memorial reverse design that ran from 1959 through 2008. On the surface, it looks ordinary, but under magnification, collectors look for sharpness, luster, and strike quality, and that's where value can begin to climb. Here's a detail collectors quietly watch: strike quality. Denver Mint coins from this era were known for strong production output, but not always for perfect strikes. That means coins with crisp lettering, fully detailed Lincoln portraits, and clean memorial lines on the reverse can stand out dramatically from the average example. And when they do, grading services take notice. This difference can completely change interest, because while millions of circulated 1961 D pennies exist and trade for only face value or slightly more, certified high-grade examples have sold for prices that surprise even experienced collectors. Not because every coin is rare, but because very few survived in near-perfect condition after decades of circulation, storage, and handling. Now let's talk about what collectors actually look for. First is condition. A worn coin with flattened details, dark spotting, or corrosion is usually considered common. But a sharply struck, bright red copper example with minimal marks and original mint luster can fall into an entirely different category. This is where many people get confused, because two pennies from the same year and mint can look similar at first glance, yet differ in value by hundreds or even thousands of dollars, depending on surface quality and preservation. Second is strike and eye appeal. Collectors want coins that look fresh, even if they're 60-plus years old. Strong details in Lincoln's hair, beard, and coat, along with clean, bold lettering on both sides, can dramatically raise interest. Coins with blotchy toning, scratches, or cleaning marks often lose value fast. And that brings us to one of the biggest mistakes owners make: cleaning their coins. This is where many people get confused, because cleaning seems like it should increase value. But in reality, cleaning usually does the opposite. It strips away original surfaces, leaves microscopic scratches, and permanently damages collector appeal. A cleaned penny that might have been worth serious money in untouched condition often becomes worth little more than face value. For collectors, originality is everything. Now let's talk about varieties, because this is where hidden financial potential really begins to show. While the 1961 penny isn't famous for dramatic doubled dies like some other dates, collectors still look closely for minor repunched mint marks, subtle die cracks, and strike anomalies that escape notice during production. These are not common, but when discovered and authenticated, they can bring strong interest. This difference can completely change interest, because a standard coin and a recognized variety may come from the same year and mint, yet attract entirely different buyers and price levels. Another factor collectors quietly watch is color designation. Copper coins are graded not just by wear and strike, but by surface color, typically categorized as red, red-brown, or brown. A full red 1961 penny that still retains its original mint color is far scarcer than most people realize. This is where many people get confused, because over time, copper naturally darkens. Finding one that stayed bright for over 6 decades is unusual, and collectors compete for them when certified by professional grading services. Now let's talk about real-world value ranges, realistically and responsibly. In circulated condition, most 1961 pennies are worth only face value, or a few cents at best. There's no secret fortune hiding in a jar of heavily worn examples. But in uncirculated condition, values can rise steadily, especially for coins with strong eye appeal. And in top-tier certified grades, select examples have sold for unusually high prices compared to what most people expect from a modern penny. This is where many people get confused, because value isn't about age alone. It's about rarity within quality tiers. While millions were minted, only a tiny fraction survived in premium condition with no wear, original luster, strong strikes, and clean surfaces. That's where collectors pay attention, and that's where quiet wealth discovery sometimes happens. And here's another detail collectors quietly watch: preservation history. Coins that sat untouched in old albums, rolls, or collections, especially those stored in dry, stable environments, often look dramatically better than coins that circulated through pockets, jars, and drawers. Some sellers discover that a coin they inherited decades ago, forgotten in a box, turns out to be worth far more than expected because it avoided damage that most coins couldn't escape. This difference can completely change interest, because two people can both own a 1961 penny, but one may hold a coin that's functionally common, while the other unknowingly holds something with strong collector demand. Now let's talk about another major mistake owners make: improper storage. Exposure to moisture, Air, heat, and household chemicals can permanently damage copper coins. Storing pennies loose in jars, plastic bags, or damp basements often leads to spotting, corrosion, or surface changes that reduce collector appeal. This is where many people get confused, because damage doesn't always look dramatic at first, but subtle surface changes can drastically lower value in the eyes of grading professionals. Proper storage, such as coin holders designed for copper, preserves original surfaces and keeps future options open. And when it comes to coins with hidden financial potential, keeping options open matters more than people realize. Now let's address something many collectors quietly consider but rarely discuss openly: patience. In the coin market, timing can matter just as much as condition. Some sellers rush to sell their coins immediately, often to dealers who must buy below retail to stay in business. Others take time to learn, compare sales data, and wait for the right moment or buyer. And this is where patient sellers sometimes discover unexpected income, not through luck, but through knowledge and timing. This is where many people get confused, because the coin market isn't about quick wins. It's about understanding what you have, verifying it properly, and positioning it carefully. Coins with true collector appeal often perform better when marketed thoughtfully, rather than rushed into fast transactions. Let's return to the 1961 penny itself. Collectors remain focused on this date not because it's rare in quantity, but because it represents one of those quiet sleeper issues common in circulation, yet scarce in top condition. It's the kind of coin that doesn't grab headlines, but consistently attracts strong interest among condition-focused collectors. And that's often where hidden financial potential lies, not in the obvious stars, but in the overlooked coins that quietly outperform expectations at the highest quality levels. Here's a detail collectors quietly watch: professional certification. Raw coins, meaning ungraded coins, can look impressive, but value becomes clearer when coins are authenticated and graded by major services. This creates trust, establishes condition, and opens access to stronger buyers. This difference can completely change interest, because uncertified coins often trade casually, while certified coins enter structured collector markets where competitive bidding happens. Now let's talk about what separates ordinary examples from life-changing sale results for select examples, responsibly and realistically. It's not the date alone. It's not the mint mark alone. It's not even just being uncirculated. It's the combination of pristine surfaces, strong strike, original color, absence of cleaning, and professional certification, all working together. That combination is rare, and that rarity is what drives serious collector interest. This is where many people get confused, because they hear stories about high sales and assume all coins from that year qualify. In reality, only a very small percentage meet those standards. But that doesn't mean checking your coins isn't worthwhile, because the only way hidden financial potential ever turns into opportunity is if someone looks. Many quiet wealth discovery stories begin the same way: someone checking old jars, inherited collections, or forgotten rolls and realizing one example stands out. Not because it's guaranteed, but because curiosity and patience made discovery possible. And here's something else collectors quietly watch: subtle differences between coins from the same mint and year. Some strikes are soft, some are sharp, some surfaces are dull, some glow with original luster, some coins were mishandled, others were protected. This difference can completely change interest, even though the coins technically share the same date and mint mark. Now let's talk about one more mistake owners often make: assuming they already know what they have. This is where many people get confused, because memory fades, packaging gets lost, and coins get mixed together over decades. A coin someone remembers as just a penny may actually be a premium quality example they've never looked at closely. And until it's examined properly, under good lighting, magnification, and possibly by professionals, its true market potential remains unknown. So what should you actually do if you own a 1961 penny? First, examine it carefully. Look at the surfaces. Is there wear? Are there scratches? Does it still have luster? Check the details, Lincoln's hair, the lettering, the memorial lines on the reverse. Second, never clean it. Even if it looks dirty, cleaning can permanently reduce its value. Third, store it properly. Use coin holders or flips designed for copper coins. And fourth, consider professional evaluation if your coin looks unusually sharp, bright, or untouched. This is where patient sellers sometimes discover unexpected income, not because they rushed, but because they let knowledge guide their decisions. And here's something important to remember. Even if your coin turns out to be common, the process of learning and checking builds awareness. Because today it might be a 1961 penny. Tomorrow it could be another date, another coin, another quiet opportunity waiting unnoticed. This difference can completely change interest, not just in one coin, but in how you look at every coin you touch. So as we wrap up, remember this. The 1961 Lincoln penny isn't famous. It isn't flashy. It isn't rare in raw numbers. But for select examples, preserved, certified, and exceptional, it has produced surprisingly strong collector demand and life-changing sale results for a small group of owners. That's what makes it fascinating. Not hype, but quiet potential hiding in plain sight. Before you move on, take a moment to check your own pennies. Look closely. You might not find anything unusual, but the only way hidden financial potential ever becomes real is if someone actually looks. And if you'd like to learn about another Lincoln penny date that surprised collectors in similar ways, watch the next video. Because some of the most interesting discoveries come from the coins people ignore the most. Knowledge and patience matter more than speed. And sometimes, quiet wealth discovery starts with nothing more than a single penny.